Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Anakwe, and I am studying in neuroscience in the College of Arts and Sciences. And for my project, I decided to do something a bit different, which is Quickening, a comic book depicting the clash of worldviews underlying the abortion debate. And I was very much helped by my wonderful advisor, Davida Pines, who is also just a great person. Okay, so how did it start? So I was having a conversation with a close friend of mine, and somehow it circled to abortion. And I shared my view that I believe abortion should be illegal because I believe human life should be protected from conception. And then she said, yeah, it's scientifically a life from conception, but she was against abortion. And when I heard that, she was for abortion. And when I heard that, I was kind of shocked because most of the arguments I'd heard from other people was that it shouldn't be protected from conception because it's not technically human life. But with what she said, she was like, yes, it's human life, but there are other things to consider. So from that, I decided to start with these driving questions, which really drove my project. So my first question was, how do people answer the question of when life begins, and how do their answers shape their view on abortion? And then what else shapes people's views on abortion, and is there any avenue for reconciliation? So for my methods, I had 3 interviews. So the first one was with Carrie, Dr. Preston, the director of Kilachand. My next interview was with Tommy, and he wanted to stay anonymous, but he's a friend in the natural sciences. And my last interview was with Joanne, who is someone that had abortion when she was younger and then joined a crisis pregnancy center. So the first 2 are pro-life. The first 2 are pro-choice, and the last person, Joanne, is pro-life. And then methods, I also had a literature review and also listened to a podcast as well. So these are all the other sources that I had. And their arguments range from abortion should be legal, even in cases of rape and incest, to abortion should be legal to the point of birth, to abortion should be, to post-birth abortion should also be considered. So with all this, I came up with the product Quickening, and Quickening is the word used for when a pregnant woman first feels a fetus move in her womb. And the reason I chose this word was because less than 200 years ago, when, believe it or not, abortion was not such a contentious issue, this was the dividing line between legal abortion and illegal abortion. But now, again, radical shift to today, and the abortion debate has quickened, reaching an arguably all-time high as people rally for or against the Texas abortion law. So with all this, why comics? Why choose this to portray abortion? And one of the reasons was that it efficiently communicates complex ideas. Another reason is that it visualizes underlying and unrelated, unstated issues, which really fits with abortion. And it also makes sense of a variety of viewpoints by giving them shape and concretizing them. And this was to make sense of these viewpoints, not only for anyone who reads it, but also for myself, since I was encountering people that had vastly, widely different worldviews from me. So it was taking the time to actually listen and try to shape what they were saying. And my advisor said that since I was putting a lot of people under the microscope, I should probably do the same for myself. And especially with a topic like this, I don't believe like there's any neutral ground. So the best way to approach it is to be very explicit with my own bias. So as I said, I am against abortion, and though this whole project made me think about my stance a lot more, my stance still stands. And the reason for that is I believe the Bible is the word of God. Now, I should say that there are a lot of people that will agree with me, but would disagree with everything I say from here. But one of the reasons I believe like one of the most compelling factors of the Bible that speaks to defending life from conception is the fact that when Jesus, who is the divine Son of God, when he came down to earth to save people from their sins, he chose to come down as a human from the point of conception. And as Vadi Bakum states, I heard this argument from him, him choosing to do that vindicates, verifies, and validates the sanctity of human life at every point. So that was my view. Now on to what the people I interviewed thought. So when does human life begin was the first question that I asked. And basically everyone, including the authors that I read and the people I interviewed, they all agreed that human life scientifically begins in conception, except for Tommy, who said that it begins at 12 weeks. And I thought this was interesting because he's actually the only one who's in the natural sciences. But then for those who are pro-choice, and I will argue also that for those who are pro-life, this was not the deciding factor to shaping their stance on abortion. So, considering these views, it made sense to reframe the question to when should human life be protected? And these were the different answers and their justifications. So, there was the answer of conception and the idea of dignity of human life defined by God. So it's not like really the fact that science says that human life begins at conception, like that matters for sure. But then they're saying that there's intrinsic worth in human life that is untouchable. Then another answer was viability, which is that woman's life matters ultimately. However, she viewed that there was something important about when the fetus can survive on its own. And then another answer was that at birth, and that women are persons and they have right to bodily autonomy and their lives matters more versus the fetus who's a non-person. And then again, there was this argument for afterbirth, where their argument was that the fetus and birth child are morally equivalent as non-persons because they do not have the capacity of choice and the capacity to act on that choice. And for that reason, if the family determines that they're too much of a burden, then this should be allowed. So what was my ultimate conclusion for this? And what I found was that at the bedrock of the abortion debate lies a difference between how people view what human life is when it's meaningful, and also what rights are inviolable that should be attributed to it. And whether people derive these concepts from what we typically refer to as organized religion or they derive it from another belief system, each person based their arguments on a presupposed moral framework. And these moral frameworks are not reconcilable. They're completely different, especially on the topic of abortion. And furthermore, each person that I talked to believed so much in their beliefs that they were willing to fight for it in the political scale. And that shows like they were willing to implement or impose their beliefs in the public sphere. So from that conclusion, what next is the stakes? And these are the other questions that I really do want to consider, which is where does each argument lead? Where does each presupposition lead? And what are the costs of legally forcing women to have children against their will versus allowing each woman to decide what a human life is worth? Finally, this is the QR code that links to the book. It's very rough, but feel free to see it. And I'm done. Thank you guys so much.
Plans of expanding the comic eventually? So I see that, I guess from your conclusion, based on who you've interviewed, it's a very dualistic divide between two sides, but have you looked into other perspectives, such as in East Asia or places like Tibet or Japan in regards to, I guess, a Buddhist perspective of the idea of abortion, or in this case, are there any plans to expand upon it beyond an American or, I guess, this sort of sphere of thought, or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think ideally I would like to do that. The reason I focused on the US was because it was the easiest, but I'm actually Nigerian, so that was something I was considering as well. So expanding and looking at other viewpoints, I think will make this even more multifaceted. So that'll be interesting to do for sure.
So you mentioned that one of the persons you interviewed had an abortion but was now pro-life.
But is pro-life now.
But yeah, is pro-life now. So I was just wondering why they have that stance and if you could elaborate more on that.
Yeah, great question. So that was Joanne, and so when she had an abortion, it was more so like her parents kind of made her do it with what she said, but she said she still feels the guilt because she didn't fight to make them not do it. But she said at that point she felt guilty, but then she converted from atheism to being a Catholic, and she said with that conversion with praying, it made her remember those moments and have to work through it.
I was curious, especially following up with Joanne's story, if there was ever a distinction drawn between any of the interviews between a personal choice with abortion and whether or not they would be pro-choice or pro-life, and what stance they might think more for others, or how it should be instituted medically or politically.
Yeah, so with a friend that I actually talked with in the beginning, we had a deeper conversation after, and she mentioned for her personally, she would say she wouldn't have an abortion, but then she doesn't feel other people should have to follow that because like it's a personal issue. But then for the people specifically that I talked to, they said like kind of with the whole idea of implementing their beliefs in the public sphere, like for the ones who are pro-choice, they're like there's no, like it's immoral not to let women have these choices, but the ones who are pro-life said it's immoral not to fight for life for everyone. So for that, the distinction was on the public sphere.
Yeah, I know I like said this in class, but I just really love this project, and I think it's so admirable how you're able to like consider other people's perspectives and like really dive into that. So I'm just also really interested in how you picked the people that you interviewed. Like, was it just based on their views, or was there other reasons?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that. Yeah, there wasn't anything, I guess, specific. Initially I was like, I'm gonna find 10 people and interview all of them. But the vision never meets the reality. But I think I started with Dr. Preston because I think like with her being a professor of women, gender, and sexuality studies, like it was something that she was familiar with. And then from there, like what really mattered to me was that people had thought through their decision. And also I did want to get a spectrum of beliefs. So like with Tommy, that one was random. Like I just mentioned the project and then I heard all his thoughts. So I was like, I need to get more from him. And then with Joanne, yeah, that one was very intentional because I got two pro-choice. I wanted to see a pro-life.
So you talk a lot about how this is an irreconcilable difference. So going off of that, I was just curious how you see this evolving over time on a personal and an institutional level. If this is truly irreconcilable, then are we always going to be stuck in a perpetual cycle of back and forth, or is there a way to move forward that incorporates sort of everyone's beliefs? Do you see a solution to that?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, I actually talked with my advisor, and something that we asked was like, can we actually ever see people changing their view on abortion because it goes so deep? And I guess my answer to that, I definitely do see this clash continuing, and I think the only way there will be a shift is if there's a shift in worldviews, which goes much deeper than just saying like legal rights versus non-legal, if that makes sense.
If you had this comic reach one target population, who would that population be and why?
Give me a second.
Yeah, hard question. Sorry.
Yeah. I guess. So one of my main goal wasn't, like I wasn't trying to convince people of one side or the other, but my main goal was to get people to think about their stand. So like if they say it with their chest and they say it with full meaning. So I guess my target audience would be those people who fight for this, either pro-life or pro-choice, without actually considering what it entails. I know that's a broad group, but yeah.
Any more questions for
I can't resist. Really quick, Stephanie, I would love to hear anything you want to say about what it was like to draw this irreconcilable set of ideas, and whether drawing, do you think, does something different to this topic than writing would have, or another medium?
Yeah. Like on a surface level, I didn't want to write a whole paper, but to be honest, but ironically, I do think this was probably, in some ways, it was harder than actually just writing a paper. One thing is I'm not exactly an artist. Like, I think everyone can draw, but not everyone can draw well. So that's something I struggled with. But I think one of the things that one of the things this helped me with, again, like this, my stance on abortion is something that goes very deeply, and it's something like I can argue for. But something that I needed to do was actually listen to what other people had to say and represent it. And I remember someone telling me, like, whatever you do, just try and be fair. So I think, first of all, like being able to sit and take hours trying to represent like what someone was saying, made me understand your viewpoint more. And I think another thing that helped is, again, like with a complicated issue, like if you're trying to make it more simple or more digestible or vice versa, like drawing really lends itself to that versus writing paragraph on paragraph that some people might not read.